It was a Wednesday afternoon, 4 o'clock, in late February. Nicola was at her desk at the local council offices in Guildford, where she worked as a planning officer, and her phone buzzed with the particular soft chime that meant the doorbell at her own front door had just been rung. She did not look up immediately. The chime was a regular part of her working day: Amazon parcels, the postman, neighbors dropping off school newsletters. She would, as she usually did, check the footage on her break. At 4:12 p.m., she opened the doorbell app. The clip was 43 seconds long. The camera saw the front step, a woman in a beige overcoat, chestnut hair, mid-30s, a small overnight bag, and Nicola's husband Andrew, opening the front door of Nicola's house from the inside.
He should have been in Bristol. He had told me, that morning, kissing me at the front door at 7:20 a.m., that he would be in Bristol until Thursday evening.
This is Nicola. 38 years old. A senior planning officer for Surrey County Council. One child, a boy of 9, Jack. A modest semi-detached on a residential road in Guildford. A husband called Andrew who had, in the 11 years they had been married, never given her any clear reason to suspect that the architecture of their domestic life was anything other than what it appeared to be. Andrew was 41. A senior project manager for a national house builder. He travelled regularly, site visits to construction sites across the south of England, design reviews in Midlands offices, occasional weekends at industry conferences. The travel had been, for as long as Nicola had known him, the unremarkable backbone of his career. On the morning of Wednesday the 26th of February, Andrew had told Nicola he was going to Bristol. He had taken his small black overnight bag from the cupboard under the stairs. He had kissed her on the cheek. He had said he would call her from the hotel that evening. He had then, according to the doorbell camera, driven somewhere, not to Bristol, and at 4:08 p.m. that afternoon, had opened the front door of Nicola's house from the inside, which meant he had, at some point that day, returned home. In the doorbell footage, the woman on the front step said, in the unmistakable tone of someone arriving for a familiar visit,
"Sorry I'm late. The traffic on the A3 was awful."
Andrew said, "It's all right. Come in." Nicola sat at her desk in the council offices for the rest of the afternoon. She did not call Andrew. She did not, when she got home that evening, ask him about his day. He was, by then, allegedly in Bristol, having allegedly checked into the Holiday Inn at 5:47 p.m., sending her a photograph of his hotel room view of a service yard car park. At 10:32 p.m., Nicola sat in the small upstairs box room she used as a study and opened her laptop. She began the work that would take her, eventually, 29 days.
He had thought to send me a photograph from a hotel he had not yet, at the moment of sending, actually arrived at. The hotel car park photograph had a timestamp in the corner. The timestamp read 4:53 p.m. He had taken that photograph in a different city. Hours earlier. Before he had ever returned to our front door.
A 2024 review by the Institute of Domestic Forensics at the University of Sussex, examining the role of consumer doorbell cameras in the disclosure of marital infidelity, identified what the authors named the household perimeter paradox. In 39% of cases reviewed, the unfaithful partner had conducted a parallel relationship that occasionally entered, or was conducted at, the marital home itself. Of these cases, 62% were eventually discovered through doorbell or smart camera footage that the unfaithful partner had themselves installed, typically, the authors observed, as a security measure designed to protect the household from external threat. The second finding is more uncomfortable. The footage that disclosed the affair had, in 81% of cases, been available in the household's cloud archive for many weeks before discovery. The footage was not absent. It had simply not been examined. Nicola had not examined it. She had received the doorbell chimes, glanced at the footage, dismissed each clip over the previous several months as the postman, the neighbor, a delivery, an unfamiliar Amazon driver. On the evening of Wednesday the 26th of February, Nicola opened the doorbell archive. She scrolled back 48 weeks. Nicola and Andrew had met in 2011, when Andrew had been a junior project manager on the redevelopment of an industrial site in Camberley that Nicola, in her first year as a planning assistant, had been processing. Andrew had asked her, at a council site visit, whether she would consider a coffee. Nicola had said yes. 3 weeks later, on a long walk on the North Downs, he had told her, with what she had, at the time, taken to be candour, that he had been recently divorced, had no children, and was looking for what he had called, in his particular way of putting things, the next chapter. They were married in 2013 at a small registry office wedding in Guildford. 28 guests. A modest reception at a hotel near Newlands Corner. Jack came 2 years later. The marriage, in Nicola's account, had been steady. Not vivid. Not uncomplicated. There had been a difficult 18 months in 2018, when Andrew had been working on a particularly demanding development in Reading and had been, in Nicola's later phrasing, more elsewhere than usual. They had been to a relationship counsellor for 6 sessions. They had recovered, by Nicola's reading, into a more conscious version of the same companionable arrangement. Andrew had not, in the 11 years of their marriage, given Nicola any clear external sign that he was anything other than the partner he presented himself to be. He remembered birthdays. He cooked on weekends. He took Jack to football on Saturday mornings. He paid the joint bills on the day they were due. Nicola had no reason, none she could identify, in the months before February, to suspect anything. In retrospect, she would say, the only thing she could think of was that Andrew, in the previous 8 months, had begun to suggest she should not trouble herself with the doorbell footage. He had told her, on at least 3 separate occasions, that he would handle the footage. That she had enough to do at work. That the doorbell archive was, in his phrasing, not the most pleasant use of an evening. He had been right about that. Just not for the reason he had implied. Nicola did not confront Andrew on the Wednesday evening. She slept in the same bed as her husband on Wednesday night. She slept in the same bed on Thursday night, after he returned from Bristol with what she would later describe as the small private satisfaction of a man who has navigated a difficult day. She slept in the same bed on Friday night. She slept in the same bed on Saturday night, after he had gone to Jack's football match in Albury and had, by Nicola's evening reckoning, been an entirely competent father. During the days, she went to work. She processed planning applications. She attended a Wednesday committee meeting and presented a paper on permitted development rights in the Surrey Hills. During the evenings, between 9 p.m., when Jack had been read his bedtime story, and 1 or 2 a.m., when she allowed herself to sleep, Nicola sat in the small upstairs box room she used as a study, with her laptop, and she watched 29 evenings of doorbell footage. She watched 48 weeks of clips, in reverse chronological order. She built, in the same unhurried, methodical way she would have built a planning compliance report, a spreadsheet of every visit by a woman in a beige overcoat with chestnut hair and a small overnight bag. There were 31 such visits. Across 48 weeks. The first visit she could identify on the camera was from the previous April. The visits had been increasing in frequency. By the autumn, they had been occurring once every 9 to 14 days. By February, they had been every Wednesday afternoon between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m., and every Wednesday evening between 5 p.m. and approximately 11 p.m., after which the woman had left through the front door, walked to her car parked 2 streets over, and driven away. Nicola identified the woman, on the 11th evening of her work, by the small canvas tote bag she always carried. The bag was branded with the logo of a pediatric physiotherapy practice in Woking. Nicola searched the practice's website. There was a photograph of the team. There were 9 clinicians. One of them, a woman called Joanne Marsh, matched the woman in the doorbell footage exactly. Joanne Marsh was 34. She was unmarried. She had been a senior pediatric physiotherapist at the Woking practice for 6 years. Her LinkedIn page indicated that she had previously worked, in 2014 and 2015, at the same NHS trust in which Andrew's company had been a long-term construction contractor. Nicola added Joanne's name to the spreadsheet. On the 20th evening of her work, in the second week of March, Nicola opened a new tab on her laptop. She booked an appointment with a divorce solicitor in Godalming for the following Tuesday at 9 a.m. She paid the consultation fee from her own personal current account, not the joint account. On the 25th evening, she changed her own iCloud password, the one she had previously shared with Andrew. She also, while she was in the settings, downloaded for offline storage every photograph the joint family iPhone account had taken in the previous 5 years, in case Andrew, at some future point of confrontation, decided to delete anything. On the 28th evening, she completed a detailed inventory of the house. She photographed every room. She identified, in writing, on a separate spreadsheet, the items in the house that had been hers before the marriage, the items that had been Andrew's, and the items that had been jointly acquired and would, in due course, need to be apportioned. On the 29th evening, she sat in the box room and watched, for the second time, the original 43-second clip from the 26th of February. She watched Andrew open the door from the inside. She watched Joanne arrive, with her overnight bag, and apologize for the traffic. She watched the door close. She watched the clip 3 times. Then she went downstairs. On the Tuesday morning following the 29th evening, Nicola did not go to work. She had told her supervisor, the previous week, that she would be taking a personal day. She had not specified why. The supervisor, a woman called Helen Ridley, who had been her colleague for 9 years, had said, in the way Helen said most things, of course. At 7 a.m., after Andrew had left for what he had said was a site meeting in Crawley, Nicola took Jack to school. She bought him a breakfast bagel from a cafe near the school gates. She told him that she loved him. She did not tell him anything else. At 9 a.m., she sat across a polished oak desk from her divorce solicitor, a woman called Rachel Henderson, in an office in Godalming, and she handed Rachel a black USB drive. On the USB drive were 3 folders. The first folder, labeled 1 Footage, contained the 31 doorbell clips, each renamed with its date and time. The second folder, labeled 2 Spreadsheet, contained the master tracking document Nicola had built. The third folder, labeled 3 Identification, contained the LinkedIn screenshot of Joanne Marsh, the website biography from the Woking practice, and a printed photograph of Joanne in a beige overcoat carrying a small canvas tote, taken from an industry conference website. Rachel reviewed the contents of the USB drive in 14 minutes.
This is the most thoroughly documented case I have ever opened. I want you to know that the financial and legal trajectory you are about to enter, with this material, is going to be, as far as is humanly possible in matters of this kind, in your favor. Are you ready to begin?
Nicola said she was. Rachel asked her one further question.
Is there anything you have not considered, that you wish you had considered, before this morning?
Nicola thought about it for a long moment and said,
Yes. I want him served at home. Not at his office. I want him served on a Wednesday afternoon, between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m. While he is, on his current pattern, expecting Joanne.
Rachel did not laugh. She wrote something on her legal pad. She said, in the careful tones of a woman who knew that this kind of request, while not normally accommodated, was occasionally accommodated when the requesting party had brought a USB drive of this caliber to a first appointment.
We can arrange that.
2 Wednesdays later, on the 11th of March, Nicola left work at 3:30 p.m. She drove the short distance to her own street. She parked, 3 streets over, in the same residence bay where Joanne always parked. She sat in her car. She watched. At 3:43 p.m., a black Mini Cooper pulled into the bay 2 cars ahead of Nicola's. A woman in a beige overcoat got out, lifted a small canvas tote and a small overnight bag from the boot, and began to walk in the direction of Nicola's front door. Nicola followed, on foot, at a distance of approximately 30 yards. At 3:46 p.m., Joanne Marsh arrived on Nicola's front step. She rang the doorbell. The doorbell, as it always did, sounded the soft chime that played simultaneously on Nicola's phone, in Nicola's coat pocket, 28 yards away. Andrew opened the door. Joanne said, in the tone of a familiar arrival.
Sorry I'm late. The traffic on?
Nicola, walking up the front path behind Joanne, completed the sentence.
The A3 was awful.
Joanne turned around. Andrew, in the doorway, did not, for a moment, register what he was looking at. When he did, his face did the small, precise, involuntary calculation of a man whose two separate worlds had, at 3:46 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon in March, in the doorway of his own house, with the doorbell footage rolling on the perimeter camera he had himself installed, become a single world. Behind Nicola, two other figures had walked up the path, a man in a grey suit holding a manila envelope, and Rachel Henderson, the solicitor. The man in the grey suit handed the envelope to Andrew. He said, in the careful tones of a process server who had been given specific instructions, "Mr. Andrew Pemberton. You are hereby served with notice of divorce proceedings on the grounds of adultery, on the petition of your wife Mrs. Nicola Pemberton, with whom you may have correspondence through her solicitor, Mrs. Rachel Henderson, whose details are enclosed." Andrew took the envelope. He did not say anything. Nicola said, in a voice she had been carrying inside her chest for 29 evenings.
You will leave this house, Andrew, by 6 p.m. tomorrow. Your suitcases are packed. They are in the hallway. You will not collect anything else. Anything you need beyond what is in those suitcases will come through Rachel Henderson's office. Joanne, I do not know you, and I have nothing to say to you, but if you stand at my front door while I am speaking to my husband, I will not, in a moment, be responsible for the tone in which I will then speak to you. Please leave.
Joanne left. Andrew stayed long enough only to take the suitcases. He left at 4:48 p.m. He went, at first, to a hotel near Heathrow. Within 2 weeks, he had moved into a serviced flat in Reading. He has never, since, in the 11 months that have passed, asked Nicola to consider reconciliation. Nicola told Jack the following weekend. She did not tell him about Joanne. She did not tell him about the doorbell footage. She did not tell him about the 29 evenings. She told him, in the language a family therapist had helped her rehearse, that Daddy had decided he wanted to live somewhere else for a while, that Daddy still loved him very much, that they would still see Daddy every other weekend, and that none of this was Jack's fault and none of it was Jack's job to fix. Jack listened. He asked one question. "Mum, are you all right?" Nicola said, "Yes, Jack. I am all right." Jack thought about it for a moment and said, "All right. Can I have ice cream?" Nicola gave him ice cream. 2 months later, in May, on a Saturday morning when Andrew had collected Jack for his weekend, Jack, by Andrew's later report, had asked his father one further question, in the car, on the way to a National Trust property in Sussex they had visited many times before. He had asked, "Dad, was it because of the ice cream? Because if it was, I don't really need ice cream." Andrew had pulled the car over on the verge of a country lane. He had told Jack, by his later report to Nicola, through Rachel Henderson, that it was not because of the ice cream. That it was because Daddy had made some grown-up mistakes, and that those mistakes were Daddy's fault, and not Jack's, and not Mum's. Jack had thought about it, and had said, "Right. Ice cream is okay then." Andrew had cried in the car for approximately 12 minutes. Jack had looked out of the window at the hedge. When Andrew told Nicola this story, 6 weeks later, Nicola did not respond. She wrote it down, in a notebook she kept in the box room, and she filed the notebook in the bottom drawer of the desk, along with the master USB drive. Nicola did not, in the end, share the doorbell footage with anyone except Rachel Henderson. She did not show it to Andrew's family. She did not show it to her own mother, though her mother, who was 71, had asked, with the small precise concern of an older woman who had known Andrew for 10 years, whether Nicola was all right. Nicola had said she was. Her mother had not pressed. She did not, despite the small petty satisfaction it might have given her, post the footage anywhere online. She did not send it to Joanne's employer. She did not send it to anyone at the Woking practice. Joanne's employer was, in due course, an entirely separate matter that Nicola, after long consideration, decided was none of her business. What Nicola did do, 8 weeks after the 11th of March, was something she had been planning since the second evening of her 29 evenings. She uninstalled the doorbell. She replaced it with a simpler, less networked, less archived doorbell, one that simply rang inside the house, the way doorbells had rung when Nicola was a child. She did not connect it to her phone. She did not connect it to a cloud. She did not connect it to anything. She also, at the same time, replaced the locks.
What I had not understood, until I sat in that box room for 29 evenings, was that the doorbell, and the cloud, and the archive, and all the rest of it, had been not a security system. It had been a silent witness. And the silent witness had been sitting in the corner, recording a marriage I did not know I was in, while I had been telling myself I was watching the door.
On the day she uninstalled the doorbell, Nicola took the camera off the front of the house. She held it in her hand for a long moment. She did not throw it away. She put it in a box, in a cupboard, in case she ever, in the years to come, was tempted to install another one. The cupboard is locked. Nicola has the key. The divorce was granted in November, 8 months after the 11th of March. Nicola kept the Guildford house. She kept Jack, who lived with her on weeknights and saw Andrew every other weekend at the flat in Reading. The financial settlement, with the spreadsheet and the doorbell archive, was, in Rachel's professional summary, concluded with unusual rapidity in light of the strength of the documentary record. Andrew and Joanne did not, in the end, stay together. The relationship that had been carried out, for 48 weeks, in the architecture of a hidden Wednesday afternoon, did not survive the transition to a continuous shared life. Joanne moved to Bristol, where she accepted a senior post at a children's hospital. Andrew has, since the autumn, been seeing, or so Jack has reported, with the matter-of-fact factuality of a 9-year-old, a woman whom he calls Dad's friend Helen. Nicola has not asked. Nicola was promoted in September. She is now the head of planning policy for Surrey County Council. The promotion came with a substantial pay rise, which she does not need but is glad of. She has begun, in the evenings, to learn the violin. She is, by her own report, terrible at it. Jack laughs. Andrew's mother, a woman called Margaret, who had been at every Christmas in Nicola's life for the previous 11 years, sent Nicola a card in December. The card said, in handwriting Nicola did not immediately recognize as Margaret's because it was the handwriting of a woman who had been crying when she wrote it, Nicola. I have known what my son was doing, in some form, for longer than I should have. I should have told you. I am sorry. I would like, if you will let me, to continue to be Jack's grandmother. Margaret. Nicola read the card 3 times. She did not respond immediately. She thought about it for 2 weeks. On the second Saturday of January, Nicola drove Jack to Margaret's house in Hampshire. Jack and his grandmother had a long lunch. Nicola sat in Margaret's sitting room and drank a cup of tea. She did not, that day, embrace her former mother-in-law. She did not refuse the cup of tea. She told Margaret, on the doorstep at the end of the visit, that Jack would come once a month, on a Saturday, until further notice. Margaret has not asked for more. Nicola has not offered more. Jack now visits Margaret on the second Saturday of every month. Margaret picks him up. Margaret takes him home. Nicola has not, in the past 11 months, set foot in Margaret's house again. If you are listening to this story, and you are someone who has installed, somewhere in your home, a small piece of consumer technology that records the things that happen at the threshold of your house, this is what Nicola would say to you. She would say that the device is not your enemy. The device is also not your friend.